Hey y'all, Eric here. Today is July the 6th and Sunday, and this Sunday the last day of the weekend, of the holiday weekend for celebration of Independence Day. And I think while next year, most people are focusing on America's birthday next year because it will be the 250th birthday since the country's inception. But this birthday, I think, is more what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe prevalent or more important in that on Friday, Independence Day, our national legislature passed a bill called the Big Beautiful Bill and was signed into law by President Trump intentionally on Independence Day. And touting that, the Republicans, and I'm just going to call them out, not all of them, but the major leaders, the Republicans, are lying, including President Trump. And I have the receipts. But before we dive into that, the purpose of the video today is talking about complaints, problems, and solutions, or problems versus solutions. And I'm diving into this with a book that I've had since 1999. In fact, you can see I've had this book so long, the binding part of the book has essentially fallen apart, and it's split between the first few days of July and then the rest of the year. I really should replace it. But this book means a lot to me in that at the time, Keith Boykin, who's also on YouTube, he is an out black gay journalist, worked in the Clinton and Obama administrations, and he has written two books. One that I'm referencing today is called Respecting the Soul. This part that's in red, because of the light that I'm using, you can't really see it. But it's Respecting the Soul, Daily Reflections for Black Lesbians and Gays by Keith Boykin. And he also has another hard copy book that I used to have, but I lost, and I'm going to replace it too, which is also written for black, gay, and lesbians, titled One More River to Cross. It's an excellent book about the overall general journey that we as black, gays, and lesbians get a journey that we walk on and through. A lot has changed since 1999, but I will say that most people probably would agree that this year, and particularly last year after the election, we have someone automatically destroyed the transmission and engine in our cars by hitting that reverse button or putting it in the reverse gear. And so let's talk about that. So the way this book is set up, there are three parts to each day. There is a quote from someone, and then he talks about that quote from his perspective and maybe the meaning of it, and then there's a little daily mantra. So we'll go through this, and then I'll tie this in to some of the things that happened over the weekend. So today's quote is by Eldridge Cleaver. You can Google him to find out more about him, but the main claim to fame that Eldridge Cleaver is known about, and this happened during my time when I was growing up, but he's a contemporary of my mother's. Eldridge Cleaver was the leader of the Black Panther Party back in the 70s. And that's his major claim to fame. Now, I don't agree with everything that he wrote. He did write a set of essays that at the time were touted by the New York Times, but Eldridge Cleaver actually did have a problem with black people being gay and lesbian, but that's not the subject of this video. The quote is, "You're either part of the solution or part of the problem. To be a part of the solution is easier than you think. It doesn't require becoming a professional activist. it does require acting responsibly toward yourself, your family, and your community. Yourself, your family, and your community. If you don't see your doctor, don't support your children, and don't bother to vote, then you're part of the problem. For example, in April, I was diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic, and my blood sugar was almost 400 on the scale, and my A1C was 13.8. And so I could have chosen to do nothing, and that killed me. But I care about living, and so I took that and I ran with it. And my health is the most important thing to me right now. In my focuses of things that I'm doing, my health is the most important thing to right now. So therefore, to get me back into a normal range, get me off insulin, get my weight down, I have to be part of that solution. In fact, I have to be the primary part of that solution in order for it to work. Someone still has to raise your children, decide how to run the community, and take care of you when you become seriously ill. All you've done is pass the buck. But if you just take care of your own little part of the world, then the rest of us can focus on taking care of our little part of the world. And more of us will live our lives as part of the solution. And I'll give you a real world example. In my neighborhood, I see trash all the time. And I think maybe once a month or maybe once every 2 months, it just depends on the time of the year. I just go around and pick up the trash. And sometimes it's a half a bag of a regular garbage bag, half bag. One time I did it, and I actually was dragging up the hill, unbeknownst to me at the time that I was picking up trash. I wound up with 2 full bags of trash. In fact, I had to leave one, bring one up the hill, and go back to get the other one because I was about 40 pounds heavier then, and not knowing that I was diabetic and trying to do all this stuff, trying to think, where is my strength gone? And so all that I was asking is that I'm not asking you to pick up in the whole neighborhood. If you come out your front door and see trash in front of your home in the street, what is that going to do to you to pick up the trash and put it in your receptacle that can be taken away when your garbage collection comes around? On what planet is that just going to absolutely destroy your peace of mind in your home or in your front yard or in your backyard? You are not the only person that lives in that neighborhood. And it's not somebody else's job to pick it up. I'm not saying it's really your job to pick it up, but if you care about your neighborhood, you'll do it. But then again, of course, as long as it's not in our backyards or even our front yards, we don't care about it until that happens. But that's not the situation we live in with certain neighborhoods because some of them are controlled by HOAs. The mantra part of this would be, for the daily mantra you would be thinking about all day, to make sure that you are part of the solution. And so the mantra is, I am part of the solution. And so saying that, like I said, I'm part of the solution. I don't want to see trash every time I roll up in the neighborhood or if I just take a walk. I don't want to do it. So I took it upon myself to be part of the solution and pick up the trash. And I'm happy to do it. It gets me out of the house. It gets me to exercise some. I'm doing more now, but I still do this. And I walk around the neighborhood to assist people sometimes. Being part of the solution. Another example, if you've got a neighbor that's elderly, and you know full well that they cannot cut their grass, how about just taking one time, use your lawnmower, and go over there and cut the grass for them? Just go over there and cut the grass. It's just 2 hours out of your day. Just cut the grass. And if you do it right, you don't have to rake it up. just something, and then help them find someone that can cut their grass on the regular basis. That's being neighborly. Yeah, of course, there's always bad apples in the bunch. There are, but I'm not talking about them today, because they're going to get left behind unless someone has the bandwidth to try to convince them to come along with the rest of us. That's not my job. It's not. I did that during the election cycle in 2024, and it fell on deaf ears, and that's how we wound up in the position that we are. But even still, as I say that, if I stay on that, if I stand on that, then I become part of the problem, because the only thing that I'm talking about is what has happened in the past. The wounds are still raw. I'm still going to talk about it. A lot of us keep talking about the FAFO, the fucked around and finding out phase. That's what that means. People did F around, and now all of us are in the finding out phase because of a group of people who didn't listen. And now all of us are suffering because of it. And so I just want to dive into the big, beautiful bill that affects two pieces that are affecting just normal, everyday people. I'm not even going to talk about the extension of the Trump tax cuts, because the majority of that money will go to millionaires and billionaires and companies. It will not come to just normal, everyday people as a whole. There are commercials running around about small business owners saying that Trump's tax cuts put money in their pockets. I don't believe it. I don't. Because of the amount of small businesses that actually shut down during his first term, and that are having problems getting off the ground now. Small businesses jumping through hoops because of his tariff policies. And now we have a deadline coming up in the middle of the month for all of these countries who have not come to the table to make a deal with our president. And so those tariffs are going to come home and roost and affect these businesses. Prices are going to go up. In fact, they've already gone up in some respects. And not just on goods, we're talking about food. We're talking about utilities. We're talking about gasoline in cars. We're actually talking about the cars themselves, the parts to fix the cars. All of that has come to roost, and it is an absolute lie that this big, beautiful bill legislation is going to make us more prosperous than we've been in history. Those words came out of Mike Johnson's mouth, who is the Speaker of the House, and Trump himself said it again at a prep rally in Iowa on Independence Day to talk about this big, beautiful bill. But here are some things that most lay people need to understand. First, let's talk about those tax cuts. Those tax cuts cost, and the money that's going to the border, hundreds of billions of dollars that are going to the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense to shore up the border and the wall and all of that. Hundreds of billions of dollars. All that cost $4 trillion. So it has to be paid some kind of way. Medicaid alone is going to be cut by a total sum of $890 billion. Nearly $1 trillion to help pay for that. And the cuts to Medicaid means the most vulnerable in our country, to the tune of 11.8 million people are going to lose their insurance. The only insurance that they can get. Again, I'll raise my hand and use myself as an example. I used to work for Amazon, and I lost my job. And I was trying to find another job in time, couldn't, used up all my savings, got on EBT assistance so I'd have money for food. I was denied unemployment, and I was actually almost homeless. So I came back to North Carolina, living with my best friend, and I still couldn't find a job. And so fortunately, because I'm old, I'll embrace that. I turned 62 last year, which made me eligible to take early retirement. And I always say that I was forced to do that because I didn't have a job and I needed money to come in. And so I applied, it went through, and I started drawing on my Social Security. Now, here's the thing that some of you who are not on it yet may need to consider. Within the first year that you're on Social Security, there is a window where you can go ahead, if you find a full-time job, you can actually stop or suspend your Social Security benefits from being sent to you so that when you're actually ready to retire, the rest of that money that hasn't been paid out will be there waiting for you. But you only have 12 months. Once you're past the first 12 months, that window is closed. And then you are subject to penalties and guidelines on how much money you can make without any tax implications or penalties associated with your money that you earn from Social Security and the money that you earn from your job until you reach the full retirement age. And if you have any questions about that, I would suggest that you call and speak to a Social Security Administration specialist who's trained on all of this to talk to them about that. If that seems like it's going to be your future. So I got back here, got my Social Security, still getting turned down for whatever jobs, even jobs that I could do in my sleep. And to compound that, I don't have a car. And so I would have to figure that out as well. And so I applied here in the state for the Affordable Care Act, thinking that probably because of my being on Social Security, I could get a $0 premium plan, a silver plan, and then I wouldn't have vision insurance, and there would probably an issue with prescriptions, but at least I would have the medical part because I had a mild heart attack 5 years ago and a clinical heart attack, and I have a stent in one of my arteries, and so I was diagnosed with high blood pressure, I was overweight and all of that, and so I needed to get to a doctor as soon as I can to see where I was so I could start working on it. Turns out I don't have high blood pressure, and the reason my blood pressure fluctuates is because I'm overweight, but the reason I'm overweight and couldn't drop weight is because I have diabetes. And it is family oriented because I can go back on my father's side, and that's where it came from. But I've already talked about it in other videos, and I'll probably talk about it again. But anyway, I digress. So I got rejected for the Obamacare because the amount of money I was getting from Social Security did not qualify me for the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. So they referred me to my state's Medicaid program. So I filled that information out, and I was approved within days. And I have the WellCare North Carolina plan, was able to get a PCP, and so on and so on. And now that's how I found out I was diabetic, and so on and so on. Now back to my point about the $890 billion being cut from Medicaid. That means because I was able to get insurance, it was because the state of North Carolina actually expanded Medicaid to include people like me. I'm retired, but I'm not eligible for Medicare. I'm drawing Social Security, and I need insurance. And so Medicaid expansion was actually done in part for people who are in my situation. I am also one of those people, because of the age range change, that anyone prior to Friday, anyone between 19 and 54 had to qualify with some other parameters in order to be on Medicaid. And because I was 62, I was not bound by those policies. Well, now that age range has been changed from 19 to 54, now from 19 to 64. And so part of that is that people are going to have to work 80 hours a month or volunteer up to 80 hours a month, but it's a minimum of 20 hours a month in order to qualify. I think this is also for the SNAP benefits, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, Medicaid, and some other things. If they are not disabled. Now, Mike Johnson said, and Trump said himself, and other Republicans said, the reason they're doing this is to root out fraud, waste, and abuse. Where have you heard that from? I'll give you a hint. Doge. That was a massive fail, other than firing people that didn't need to be fired. And even that is still in the court system. If they really wanted to root out fraud and abuse, I did a video about the North Carolina State Attorney General, Jeff Jackson, along with South Carolina's State Attorney General and some other attorney generals across the country who actually found fraud, waste, and abuse to the tune of millions of dollars and arrested 354 people that were in the industry stealing money from Medicare and Medicaid. That is actual fraud, waste, and abuse. Now, I've said in other videos that yes, there's probably waste in government. Of course there are. I raise my hand and use myself as an example. I'm a commissioned notary public in the state of North Carolina. And we are waiting on this state to get off its ass and implement a remote online notarization, meaning I join companies, I log in, and I'm waiting for people to say, hey, I need something notarized, and we do this online. Other states already have this. In fact, every single state around North Carolina already has this. When Roy Cooper was governor, he signed that into law in 2017. It's either 2017 or 2019. We're in 2025, and they still haven't figured out the rules or updated the handbook or anything like that. One of the things they always say, well, our department is shorthanded. Your department has always been shorthanded. We're talking about the government. Of course you don't have enough people. Ask anybody about the DMV. Of course. Again, part of the problem, not being part of the solution. But let me get back to my point. This is holding up people from expanding their small businesses. Yet it seems to me that they don't care about it because they just announced that Governor Stein has extended the emergency video notarization law, which allowed people to do emergency video notarizations during COVID until the remote part comes online, which probably now will not happen in 2025 because it was extended until July 1st of 2026. That is not being part of the solution. Because most people are only focusing on the money they can gain from doing that, because I see in notary groups on Facebook, people are asking, is it worth getting the commission, and do you actually earn money doing that? And honestly, the short answer is no. It depends on how you want to do your business. But I digress. So let me get back to that. So that is one reason how they're going to pay for it, by cutting $890 billion from Medicaid. And there are, in North Carolina, I believe it's to the tune of more than 500,000 people in North Carolina are in danger of losing their insurance. And so if you know the name of your plan, but you don't know if it's a Medicaid plan, then this is what I need you to do. And I have the page up here for you. I need you, or get someone to help you, to go to the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services page under North Carolina Medicaid Division of Health Benefits. Under there, they have a list of all of the Medicaid plans that are offered in North Carolina. And all you have to do is search, and you can see if your plan is a Medicaid plan in North Carolina. And if you have Medicaid, then you should be able, not everybody has done it, but you should have an account that you can log into. But if you don't, then you'll be able to call and talk to someone to verify this. In fact, if you have an insurance card, you should call the number on the back of the card. That is another way for you to confirm if your insurance is in fact a Medicaid insurance plan, and then what are your options based on the cuts that are coming down the pipe. Now, and I will link this in the description of this video. Now, this does not go into effect this year. This piece of the Big Beautiful Bill doesn't go into effect until January 1st, 2026. I have another video where I talk about the Big Beautiful Bill, and I have linked that bill. It's 940 pages, almost equal to the number of pages that are in Project 2025. And yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. The Big Beautiful Bill is based on Project 2025. And then you can read it for yourself. You don't have to believe me. In fact, I would rather people just read the information and come to their own educated conclusions. And I say educated because they will have educated themselves on the information that's in the bill. So I will link that. Now, the other thing that they announced, trying to get the American people to jump on board with this, is that Donald Trump was talking about no tax on tips or overtime, or even Social Security. And so I don't have a date as to when that will be effective. But here's the thing. They didn't tell you the whole truth by saying that. They just put all of that together. Extending the 2017 Trump tax cuts. No taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, and no taxes on Social Security. They didn't tell you everything. So I have a page for you that I will also link in the description of this video so that you understand exactly what they're going to do. So here's the article. It was done by, I found this on the MSN, and this was done by, I think this came from Money Magazine. But I will put this link in the description through the Wall Street Journal. Here it is. So here's what has been found in what they call the fine print. Many service workers are eagerly awaiting no longer paying taxes on their tips. Yet the fine print in Republicans' new law could limit savings for some waiters, bartenders, and others. Not just waiters and waitresses or bartenders, but we're also talking about people in the gig economy, people who are driving for Uber and Lyft, people who are doing work for Instacart, Uber Eats, driving for some of the other small companies, whether it's delivering alcohol orders, or anything like that. You're part of this. Among the particulars restricting the reach of the measure, only the first $25,000 in tips are free from income taxes. Now, if you live in the state of Florida, for example, guess what? There are no income taxes, so you're already enjoying the fact that you don't have to pay taxes on your income. It's state income taxes on your income. Tipped workers will still face the 7.65% combined payroll taxes that fund Social Security and Medicaid, and workers won't be able to benefit if federal officials say their type of service job does not qualify. So this is the piece that people who are hanging on no taxes on tips, what that actually means is no income taxes on the tips. Your tips are still going to be subject to Social Security and Medicare taxes. And there is a real possibility that a particular industry that you work in, where you can get tips, let's say you work for Starbucks, you may not even be qualified for not getting income taxes stopped on your first $25,000. See, they didn't tell you that, did they? No taxes on tips started as a campaign promise by President Trump during a 2024 stop in Nevada, the state with the highest concentration of service workers who rely on tips. It is now a key element of the tax and spending mega bill that Trump signed into law on Friday, which was Independence Day. Even though it is one of the smaller pieces of the law in terms of dollars, accounting for $32 billion out of the $4.5 trillion in taxes, in fact, this piece is it's barely a tenth of what the cut is going to be in Medicaid itself. The cut could save some service workers thousands of dollars a year in federal taxes. It would be extra money, said Yolanda Garcia, a barista at Resorts World Las Vegas. It would help me buy more groceries, even a gallon of gas. She estimates she usually gets $200 to $300 every 2 weeks, every 2 week pay period from tips. If she makes less, taxes cut into her wages because she is taxed on an estimate of her wages and tips. And that's her right there. Some 4 million people in the U.S., or 2.5% of all workers, earn tips, according to the Budget Lab at Yale, a nonpartisan research center founded by former Biden administration officials. Some workers can make tens of thousands of dollars, even more, in tips in years. To hold on to their gratuities, some workers already illegally skip reporting the income to avoid paying taxes on it. Workers are currently taxed on their tips as part of their overall income, which many complain forces them to skimp on such basics as food and gas, as well as vacations. More than a third of tipped workers don't make enough to pay federal income taxes, including many low-income workers with children and students who work part-time tip jobs. They wouldn't benefit from the no tax on tips deduction. Under Republicans' policies, workers who do pay federal income tax would be able to deduct up to $25,000 for tips. For someone in the 12% tax bracket making that much in tips, the change would deliver up to $3,000 in savings the deduction would start phasing out once the individual income reaches $150,000 or $300,000 for a joint return for people who are married. The relief will take effect this tax year, meaning when you file your taxes in 2026, you will be filing them for the tax year of 2025. The law orders the Treasury Secretary to publish a list of typical tip-earning jobs that qualify for the deduction, so it is unclear now exactly who will benefit. The new law also requires the Social Security numbers of the worker and any spouse, barring workers living in the country illegally and workers married to them, from claiming the deduction. Other parts of this legislation, such as changes to Medicaid, nutrition assistance benefits, or SNAP, and other tax cuts, could also affect service workers. Employers will need to adjust their payroll systems. The businesses might need to communicate with workers about the limits so employees don't expect tax breaks they aren't getting. One thing that this article that I was reading through doesn't state is that, and again, like I said, I will link this in the description of the video, but what it doesn't tell you is the timeline. And so the 2017 tax cuts in this bill are permanent. The no tax on tips, the no tax on overtime, the no tax on Social Security, those are not permanent. They end at the end of the term of this presidency. So even if you qualify for those tax deductions, you're only going to get them for the next 3 years. Yep, they didn't tell you that, did they? No, they drew you in, you drink it, you get a little bit of a benefit for a little bit of a period, and then they're going to snatch it away from you. Unless the next administration does something about trying to keep it. But again, that even this has a cost associated to it. And so the $890 billion in Medicaid still isn't enough. And like I told you earlier in this video, I tried to get insurance with the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. This bill also takes people off of the rolls of Obamacare and some people with regard to Social Security. So the overall cut to health care in this bill is in the amount of over $1 trillion. $1 trillion gutted out of health care. But they still haven't balanced this bill. Trump and Mike Johnson and the MAGA Republicans are going on the premise that this bill is going to jumpstart the economy. It is going to jumpstart getting the fraud, waste, and abuse out of the United States, and that more money is going to go into Americans' pockets. Ain't happening. Ain't happening. And I'll tell you why. Because this bill is slated to add $3.4 trillion to the national debt because they couldn't cover it all. Because they couldn't cover it all. It's like just slapping the money on a credit card. And when the United States can't pay its obligations, the United States credit rating is going to take a hit. Trump has said in Iowa that it's going to be, Mike Johnson said that this bill is going to make the United States more prosperous than it has ever been in the history of this country. As you know, I like to say that, ever in the history of this country. That nobody does it better than they do. Donald Trump said essentially the same thing. the jobs report for June, where they were expecting an addition of 100,000 jobs, it was actually a loss of 33,000 jobs, meaning that job number report is now it's in the negative range. In the negative range. It has been going downhill, I think with the exception of April, because April's numbers didn't include the termination of employees from the federal government, and so it ticked up a bit. But overall, the first few months of his second term, job growth is now underwater and has steadily gone downhill. People have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars from their 401ks, and how their pensions are put into the stock market based on these policies that have happened this year. I mean, it's a mess. It's a mess. Yet he's talking about the disastrous Biden administration, where the Biden administration, a single term president, added more jobs to the rolls than any other administration in the history of this country. More jobs than Obama, more jobs than Clinton. And it's interesting to note, if you look at it, Democratic administrations always add jobs. Republican administrations always lose jobs. So again, if we want to fix this, then we have to be part of the solution. If you are not trying to fix this, and if you think this is okay, then guess what? You're part of the problem. And problems need to be fixed. While it is true, not all problems can be solved. If this problem can't be solved, then we'll create something else in its place. But again, that is still being part of the solution. What about you? Think about where you stand on this. Are you part of the problem? Or are you part of the solution? Even something small, walking at your front door every day on your way to work, you see some trash on the side of the road. That's a teaching moment for stewardship that you can teach your children. But again, are you part of the problem in your neighborhood? Or are you part of the solution? Think about that. And we'll see you on the next video.